biggest guest we're getting on the podcast, so very excited. هلا بتاكل مسخن? Found a really cool interview guest. You might recognize him. He's really famous. He's a legend.
All right.
Proud moment. Slash from.
You can call me Flash if you want.
Oh my God. 3, 2, 1. Woo! All right. We're sitting here today. Well, welcome back to the Basel Meets podcast. This is a special Anghami episode. We're sitting with the man, the legend, Slash. I never thought I'd say this on my podcast, but oh my God. I'm sitting with you here on the Basel Meets podcast. It is an absolute honor for me.
Aw, that's sweet. Thanks.
Absolute honor for me. Actually, I have a funny story. Back in 2010, November 2010, I think you were new on Twitter back then.
Yeah.
And you were very active. And I tweeted out at you on my birthday. And I was like, hey, Slash, it's my birthday. And can you wish me happy birthday so my friends could be jealous? And lo and behold, I got a DM. It was from you, and it says, "Happy birthday, Basel." I was like, "Oh my God!" I just told everybody at that time.
Right. Yeah. Okay. 2010. That sounds about right. Like 2009, 2010 is when I first started using all that stuff.
Yeah. Well, I mean, back then, 2010, it was a time where you were releasing your first sort of solo record.
That's how I got into it. I mean, prior to that, I was never interested in, Facebook or what was the thing at the time. The big site, the big social networking site.
There was Facebook, there was Twitter, there was MySpace.
Yeah, right. Anyway, so I never got into all that. But then when I started doing my own solo thing, and that was also with my own record company, and I was solely responsible for everything, I thought, what a great way to interact with fans, with Twitter, where you can actually tell people what's going on directly. And that's how I sort of got into all that.
It's funny because, I mean, like that tweet, and here I am today, is always coming full circle. Right. But for me, it's 2010. It was the year where you were sort of like releasing your initial record. And there was a lot of great frontmen at that time where you were working with frontmen and women at that time. From Lemmy to...
It was a really cool project.
It was amazing.
It was something that I set out to do that had been on my mind during the Velvet Revolver days. I was like, what am I going to do? I have this thing I want to do at some point when I have time. And it turned out to be something that I was really passionate about. I was fortunate enough to be able to get all these different artists to work on that record with me. And looking back on it, it was an impossible record to make, but somehow I managed to do it.
It was amazing. It was a really good record.
That's also how I met Myles Kennedy and how we started this whole thing.
Exactly. That was what my question was. How do you landed on Myles Kennedy, and out of all that like pool of amazing vocalists, like you went to Myles Kennedy and you subsequently created multiple records with him. Why Myles, and how did that relationship sort of come about?
It's an interesting, it's probably a longer story than we actually have time for, but in a nutshell, when I was working with all those different people, a good majority of them I knew, and then there were some people that I didn't know, but everybody had their thing that they were doing. And when I thought of Myles Kennedy, it was only because I'd heard his name thrown around so many times and I was curious. He had to be good. I mean, at that time, he'd just flown back from having done a bunch of rehearsals with Led Zeppelin for a tour that they were thinking about doing that they ended up not doing. And I was like, this guy's got to be good. We actually went out to him to audition for Velvet Revolver before Scott Weiland came into it, and he just never showed up.
What?
And that's the only thing, So I got in touch with him and I asked him if he'd be interested on singing this one piece of music that I had, because the rest of the record was done. But I had 2 songs that were really cool pieces of music that I could never figure out who should sing. So at this point, you start just doing crazy shit. So I thought, well, let me check out this guy who I've never heard sing, that I've heard of, and see what happens. And so I talked to him on the phone. He said, send it. And I sent him the music. And about a couple days, 3 or 4 days later, I got an MP3, and I was like, oh, here it is, press play. And it was fucking amazing.
Yeah.
And I was like, wow. And, so I flew him out to LA, and we met for the first time, and we got along really well. And he was just totally cool, and he did this amazing vocal. And I said, you want to do one other one? And that was a song called Back from Cali, so Starlight and Back from Cali. And at that point, realizing what kind of range he had, as I was trying to figure out how I was going to tour on this record. Couldn't get all these different people to come and sing on the road. But Myles, you know, he had the kind of range where he could do the stuff that was on that record and probably the Guns N' Roses stuff and some Velvet Revolver stuff and, you know, that whole sort of catalog. And I asked him and he signed on to do it. And so then I met Brent Fitz and Todd Kearns and we rehearsed for about a week and set out on the road. And we've been together ever since. It was that magic combination of people that just, you know, just sparked. You know?
That's phenomenal. I mean,
it doesn't happen all the time.
it doesn't.
No, so
And it was such a good match between you and him. It's absolutely, it's a match made in heaven. It's a rock and roll heaven. You know, these two forces coming together was such an incredible.
We have a good time doing it, and I mean, so for me, that's what makes it really work. Is musically we get along really well. Personally, we get along really well, and we just have sort of a natural chemistry that we don't have to think about. It's a very simple, straightforward band. There's not a lot of bells and whistles. We write some stuff, and we get together, jam until we produce enough material to make a record.
Yeah.
And then we record it and go on the road.
Well, you know, I was listening to Living the Dream, and obviously it's one of my favorite rock albums this year, and maybe in the last 5 years, easily one of the best rock albums that came out.
Wow.
And honestly, like, this is just, as a rock fan, been a rock fan for like 20 years, this album is phenomenal. It's awesome.
Thank you.
And one thing I noticed is there was a lot of like Slash. It's unapologetically Slash, right? You got your Velvet Revolver in there, you got your GNR in there, you got even the cowbell sometimes. And it just I thought about you touring in the past couple of years, and then this record coming out at the same time. Did that influence you in the writing process of that album?
I don't. I mean, indirectly, everything is relative, right? But I don't think there was any kind of conscious, direct influence from the Guns tour into the making of the Conspirators record, because I think, you know, a lot of that material was written not in its entirety, but a lot of those ideas came from the World on Fire tour.
Oh, okay.
And I wouldn't, because before I knew the Guns thing was going to happen, I was just doing our normal thing, which is I write on the road, and then at the end of the tour, whenever we have a break, we go into a little room and we start jamming out these ideas. And so we had started doing that. And then the Guns N' Roses thing came along. And so as soon as the World on Fire tour ended, instead of going into pre-production, I went out with Guns N' Roses, and that went on for, you know, before I could get into the studio to do the Conspirators record, it was a year and a half.
Wow.
So when we did have a break, I said, okay, let's go and grab those old ideas. And then I wrote some new ones over Christmas. And so put all that together and started pre-production. And it was really more of a celebration of getting back together after almost 2 years. Yeah. You know, so I don't think it was really directly influenced by the sort of Guns tour at all.
There's a song on that record, The One You Loved Is Gone, which I think is my personal favorite.
Okay.
It's just such a complete record, such a complete song. It feels, to me, it feels very personal, very... and I'm sure for you, when you wrote that, I'm sure there was something there that was personal. How did you and Myles sort of agree on the, you know, the topic, the, you know, the sort of...
We never really discussed that. Whenever we write music, write anything, you know, I'll just come up with a very simple arrangement of ideas for one song, right? And he'll start coming up with melodies. And we'll work up the whole song, the whole arrangement together with Brent and Todd and get it so that we have all the arrangement together. And then when we're in the studio is when the ideas for his lyrics really crystallize, right? So, you know, where his ideas for lyrics come from could be a completely different place from where I thought, where the music idea came from.
Yeah.
I mean, initially that song was inspired, believe it or not, I wrote the intro for Walking Dead. Because at that time, Walking Dead didn't really have any other music outside of its score music.
Yeah.
And so I was trying to push them to play like an original song on there, but they wouldn't go for it.
Oh, wow.
Because it's me, and they don't want to have any recognizable existing names as part of the Walking Dead world.
Interesting.
And so it never happened, but it was always a good musical idea. And I introduced it to Myles to see if he would come up with something so we could create a song for Walking Dead. So he had some melodies and whatnot, but the lyrics became something completely different by the time we recorded it in 2018.
Wow. You've toured a lot in the past couple of years. You had time to put out a record. You've been, you could say you're a very busy man. You've just done a lot, not just throughout the past couple of years, but throughout your career. What kind of advice would you give people who, maybe not just musicians, but just in general, people who want to achieve what you've achieved? Did you have some kind of guiding principle for you that sort of guides you in a certain way?
For the most part, because there is a lot of stuff, like as we sit here, the things that I'm planning on doing now, and it's really sort of, setting your goals on something and then just doing it. Come hell or high water, you have to figure out how to make it happen.
Right.
And you'll always have obstacles, and you have to think around the obstacles and somehow manage to conquer those and continue on. So it's about desire, or passion and perseverance more than anything.
And that's something because you've been a lot through a lot of like ups and downs,
Yeah.
and a lot of changes.
It's just sticking to what it is that you feel, really, really strongly about, and
Right.
just going for it and not letting anything really get in your way.
That's awesome.
Easier said than done.
It's yeah, but that's why I'm here today, right? I mean, I wouldn't have never thought that I could be sitting right in front of you when I bought this mic a couple of years ago, and
Oh, this is your mic.
that's my mic. It's like it's becoming a symbol of my conversations. I think for me, I wanted to maybe wrap it up and say how you've come to the region before. This is not your first time, and you've done something in Lebanon. You've done something here in the UAE. How is it to sort of break barriers and sort of like not think of the borders and just sort of like your music translates well?
Well, it's a great statement about music in general because, and I know it's a cliche at this point, a lot of people have said it, but one of the things that you can do when it comes to relating to different people of all, wherever they come from, is through music. It's such a universal thing, so that you can almost be isolated in one place and hear about another place and have maybe heard different whatevers about it, so you have no idea what that's like. And then you go there as a musician and you just start playing and you realize that everybody's really the same.
Right.
And it's all these sort of differences are built up in people's perceptions as they speak about them or as they put them on TV, and they create this thing that doesn't really exist when you're out, sort of doing this universal thing called music, where people just sort of show up and everybody's just themselves, and it's not a big deal, and it's really enlightening,
Yeah.
as a human being.
So Anrami, this is people are going to be watching this on Anrami. People are going to be listening to this through the podcasts and through the visual element as well. Anything you want to tell your fans here in the region as a shout out maybe or something?
I'm just really thankful that I got a chance to come over here. I mean, it went back. The first gig I ever played over here was with Velvet Revolver. And that was back in, I think it was 2007 or something.
2008. I was there.
All right. And that was my first experience in probably the most foreign place that I'd been to at that time. And it was great. Had no idea what to expect and how we would go over. And we just started playing in there, and there was just a sea of kids just rocking. And it's a good example of how things are not what they seem,
Yeah.
So,
I mean, Slash, this has been an incredible honor for me and for the team here. Thank you so much for giving us your time.
It's not a problem at all. It's good to talk to you.
Absolutely wonderful to talk to you, and absolutely great to have this time with you. So thank you so much. I hope you rock tomorrow.
It's going to be killer.
You will
I'm really looking forward to it.
I'll be there right in front, singing every song, and I hope that you and Myles and the Conspirators can come back here again.
We'll definitely be back here. I'm hoping maybe in January, but if not January, the following summer.
You heard it here first, guys. January / Myles Kennedy, the Conspirators, they're coming here. So thank you so much.
I'm hoping. I didn't say
hope.
for sure.
Yes. Asterisk, hope. If not, then we'll work it out some other time.
Yeah.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate it. Thank you.
Thanks,
Thank
man.
you.
Cheers.